All right. Well, welcome to the Up My Hockey podcast, Mr. How many games now? I got on the tick here. 969 game NHLer and a Stanley Cup champion, Mr. Cory Sarich. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, man, no problem. We were chatting a little bit offline here before I pressed record about how really the hockey world is incredibly small. Like whether you even step foot in the NHL or not, like there's there's not too many points of separation
No,
that it takes to find either a common teammate or like some common story. And we were joking for the listeners here, like just before we came on, because Cory was a last minute guest because I had somebody cancel last week, and he was awesome enough to step into the slot. And so we were kind of both researching each other, and we both realized that, oh my God, we actually played together. So like
I
Cory
know,
was somebody that I
crazy.
played against before. We played against each other in the WHL and in the minors in the AHL. I'm not sure if we've crossed paths in the NHL, but we actually shared a dressing room for a weekend. So it's kind of funny how when you played as long as you did, and I mean, I played 10 years pro myself, that boy, you can cross paths and not even remember it.
Well, it's crazy how you can look back too on at old, whether it's hockey DB or you look at the odd team picture that you had, and there are guys that you just absolutely cannot remember. I was looking at the Flames, Calgary Flames, the other night, and back to one of my first years here, 07, 08 or something like that, and there was a guy by the name of I think it was Kyle Greentree or Greenlaw, and I'm like, who the heck is this guy? But I played a couple games with him, right? And you completely forget there. And then especially with our little crossover was the Detroit Vipers, who at the time was the Tampa Bay Lightning's farm club. And I look back at those team pictures when I first got to Tampa. Holy smokes, we were like the Red Army out there. We had 35 guys in the team picture because we were so awful. So there are guys there that you just scratch your head. You're like, I played with who? But yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, fair enough. Like that was well, since we're on it, I mean, we mentioned before, like Detroit. I've talked about it on the program before, like not extensively, but Bradshaw was there and Bobby J was the head coach and the assistant coach. There was only two guys, right? Like two guys there with that organization. I got picking up off the waiver, whatever that like group 6 draft or something after like training camp was over. I was with the Kings and Tampa took me off some type of waiver draft and put me in Detroit. So I go to Detroit with the Vipers, not really knowing what's going on. Hadn't played in the eye in a while or maybe ever at that point. And like we were terrible, right? I mean, I'd never been on a terrible, like we were bad. And lots of young, like really young guys on that team, lots of
Mm-hmm.
European guys in that team. And then the big club wasn't much better. And it was like a crazy, not fun year. Like
Oh,
we were not good. The only thing that I remember like really that was fun about that was that Scott Nickel was there and him and I got along great. And I know you played with him in Roch and what
yeah.
a great human being he was. But
Yeah. For me, I was a product of the Buffalo Sabres, drafted in '96, had spent, well, that was back when they could make you spend your whole summers there. There were no rules for young guys. So I spent summers in Buffalo. I thought I was going to be a Buffalo Sabre, played in Rochester for a full season where we would have crossed paths in the AHL. And then all of a sudden, I'd played almost a full season with Buffalo that year, 40 some games, but sat a lot of the time. Just out of nowhere, I think it was end of January, start of February, and you've been traded. A shock to the system. And I didn't even know where Tampa, Florida was. I knew it was in Florida. I had no clue that it was on the Gulf of Mexico. Started looking on the map, seeing all these golf courses. I'm like, how am I going to play hockey down there? And then when I got there, they were absolutely awful. But the one thing, my father-in-law and my dad as well, they were so excited for me because Buffalo was so deep on defense. They had so many great prospects like Jean-Luc Grandpierre, Brian Campbell, Dmitry Kalinin, Jason Holland, all these guys. And I got traded to Tampa, and they were just cellar dwellers, awful. They're like, well, you'll get a chance to play. And it was probably the best thing that ever happened to my career because I think if I stuck in Buffalo, it was going to be a 50-50 chance or less or worse to, potentially become a full-time NHLer. And going to Tampa honestly gave me a much better shot. So, but again, you get there, and I was used to the culture in Buffalo and Rochester, where it was teaching me how to be a real pro. And I got to Tampa, it was just a hot mess. No structure, no accountability. Everyone in the organization thought it was a big joke that we were going to be eliminated from the playoffs in January. Like, this is just the norm. So, and then I had Steve Ludzig, who had come out of the Detroit, and they'd had some success 2 or 3 years prior to us coming through their system, but it had just completely unraveled.
Isn't that boy, you hit on a lot of like really interesting points there. Like, one, to be humble enough to say, like, if I wouldn't have got traded, like, who knows? Like, that's one thing that, like, it's so hard. I mean, now that you played 1,000 games. I know now that I played 41 games, right? Like, you need to be in the right position at the right time and take advantage of whatever that opportunity is. And
100%.
yeah, to the best of your ability, and we're all trying to do it. But there's, I had Wade Redden on, for instance, and he was like, man, I made so many mistakes as a 19-year-old that first year, but I just knew I was just going to go back out, and I was going to go back out, and I was going to go back out. And they told me that, he's like, if I was in a different scenario where maybe that wasn't going to be like, that wasn't the storyline for me, like, who knows what would have happened. Right. Like,
well, you need to have someone in your corner going to bat for you too. I've been on teams where they give you a chance and a coach likes you, and you can play loose. You can go out there and not have the weight of the world on your shoulders. And then I've at the end of my career experienced the exact opposite, where you have to be absolute perfection every time you go out, and it's hard to function like that. One more tidbit about timing, like where I was drafted at the first in the second round. There was only 26 teams, so I was 27th. Well, friend of mine and world junior teammate Jesse Wallen was picked last in the first round, 26 by Detroit. They were an absolute wrecking ball with just depth in their club. And he never saw the light of day, just to the product, or the fact that they were such a great team at the time. They didn't need any young guys. None of those guys within that span of a few drafts ever could crack their lineup, because so it's timing. There's just so many things that go into it.
So many things. And then, I mean, I don't know Jesse's career at all, but it's so interesting, like how you shift from prospect to suspect, as I've said before. Like, if you're kind of not there in 3 or 4 years, like, it makes it even harder, which is why I love celebrating those guys that come up at 25, 26, 27, whenever that is, and they establish themselves, because it's really hard to break through then. And for Jesse, that might have been the same, right? You play in the minors for a few years, kind of people forget about you. They don't, maybe don't believe that you were the first rounder that you once were, and it makes it that much trickier. And then the other thing I think is interesting about what you said there, between the transition between Buffalo and Tampa, is how you can play in the same damn league, and it's a completely different experience, right? Like, you think it's the best league in the world, and everyone runs like a first class operation and this, that, and the other. But I mean, you've seen it firsthand there, like in the span of one trade, how it's like, I can't believe this is the same league.
Yeah, it's not even close. And then the other eye openers for me was obviously going from junior to pro. I didn't play on very good teams in junior. In Saskatoon, we were awful. I was just looking the year that you were a 19-year-old in Spokane and I was a 17-year-old in Saskatoon. We got in the playoffs with a record of like 29-43. We made the playoffs. We were gone in 4 games because Brandon just disposed of us. But like, and then the next 2 years, I had three junior playoff games. That's all I had. So when I got to Rochester, again, culture, depth, I was playing with the likes of Randy Cunneyworth, Mike Hurlbut, Tom Draper. Like, these are seasoned pros, guys that have been journeyman NHL guys. And they're like, here's how we do it. And for me, it was eye-opening, and I loved it. I just loved the structure, because I had zero before. It was like, just go out there, do your job, worry about yourself, and you don't have to worry about all these other people floundering around beside you, because they're taking care of themselves too. So
floundering around.
Well, and then, that was my junior career. We were awful. But the one other thing I wanted to point out was Rochester ran their club just like the parent club, like the Sabres. We even I remember that year was the first time they introduced a strength coach down in Rochester, and that was unheard of. And we had our own gym, and we had a really nice practice facility that they had just set up. at Monroe Community College. When I went later, Detroit wasn't bad, my little stint there, but I went to Springfield on a stint down, I think my second or third year in Tampa. Oh my God, like there was no one there over the age of 25 or 26. So those were your veterans. They had no clue what was going on. The young guys just kind of did their thing, showed up 20 minutes before practice. Like there was zero professionalism. It was like I'd gone back to junior. And obviously the product on the ice reflects what's going on behind the scenes. So
Right.
just completely different worlds. You're picking up on that one. And you've probably had some experiences like that too. Obviously, you played in Detroit, which was a bit of a hot mess, and then you played in some other very structured clubs, I'm sure. What were some of yours?
Well, to your point, you mean like that year in particular, where, well, one, I mean, I guess I can reflect just personally, just for 2 minutes, like went from like I don't know what you would call it, like, leading Lowell in goals. The year before that, leading the AHL in goals, like kind of thinking, okay, here we go. I was going to be an LA King, I thought, and then I got this waiver wire, and then I end up in Detroit, right? And like, holy smokes, it's sort of like one of these, right? Like, what am I doing here? But then to your point, which is such an interesting scenario, like I would have thought that would have been such an amazing opportunity. Now looking back on, even at the time, right? Because Tampa wasn't very good, right? So it's like, okay, here's a guy that's done well, and me that's been productive in the AHL, and like needing an opportunity on a team that maybe needs some help, and kind of excited about it. And that year was like when I kind of personally thought, okay, I got to dial everything in here, right? I'm going to dial it all in. I'm dialing in my preparation. I'm dialing in my off ice habits. Like I'm being, to your word, more professional than maybe I'd ever had been to that point, right? I'm like, it's time to become an NHLer. And then it was like just an awful experience. And then the other side of it was like, Martin Seaback and Afinasenikov and Clymer, and like everyone in the world seemed like they were getting called up, and rightfully so, because Tampa wasn't very good, to your point, like how many people were in the team photo. And I never got a game in Tampa. Like I never even talked to Rick Dudley, who took me off the waiver wire. Like he never even called me. It was the weirdest scenario ever. I would love to know like what that was. You mean the backdoor kind of hockey scenario of that, of like, why grab me? Why not call me up? Like, what did you want or expect? And anyways, just to your point, like zero communication right at that point within the organization, like zero kind of official development. Nobody even told me what they wanted out of me, maybe at that next level, or what I should be trying to accomplish in the AHL. And it was kind of a mess, and then I asked for a trade. To get back to your point, it's the only time I've ever asked for a trade. I was like, because I was at the end of my contract too, so I was the end of my deal, and I knew I needed to get another deal, and it wasn't looking great in Tampa, and they moved me to Winnipeg. So I went to Winnipeg, and like they were one of the premier AHL organizations, and still to this day, right? Like they had that great arena. The NHL team wasn't there yet. They ran it like an NHL club, super professional, right? And it was just like, holy smokes, right? Okay, same level again, but completely different experience at the minor league side. So yeah, to your point, like I've had people come on too, like Brad Larson got traded from Colorado with like, whatever, the 10 Hall of Famers on his team, and then ended up in Atlanta, right? He was like, it was bonkers how different it was, right? Like what guys were focused on, what the preparation was like, what the intention of the team and the group was. You saw it there. What I think is interesting though for you is because you came in at this time, like you said it was essentially chaos, a hot mess, and like within what, 4 years, 5 years, you're winning a Stanley Cup. Like how did that shift so much, and what do you think was the difference there in seeing that culture change?
Well, they obviously made some good moves. They picked up some guys like Dan Boyle, Martin St. Louis, that they saw something in. And then they obviously had high draft picks. You already got Vinny Lecavalier there. And then along comes Brad Richards. Some of the guys you mentioned, Seaback, Afanasenkov, Clymer, some of their draft picks that they're starting to give a chance. And the biggest thing though was John Tortorella and Jay Feaster. Those two came in, hockey operations, and they basically, I think, put it to the ownership, like, let us do our job, you guys, like our ownership group and even our president, like great, good people, but not really hockey savvy. They let these guys come in, do their thing, and they kind of called all the shots and made the decisions. And this is no word of a lie. John Tortorella came in and was an assistant coach and then got replaced Ludzig partway through a season. Again, we were going to get eliminated early. We were a bottom feeder and a joke. And he caught one of the doctors, our team doctors, joking about, oh, it's early to the golf course again this year. Ha ha ha. Poof, gone. Like, lost his job. Like, if you weren't pulling in the right direction, if you didn't have winning on your mind, if you weren't coming to the rink for this thing to get better day in and day out, you had no business being there. And they basically cleaned house. They found players that wanted to play. They trimmed our roster down. There was a lot of up and downs for us young guys, like little stints here and there. And they just started to filter the guys that they started to build culture is essentially what they did. And they brought it to that organization, and it's still there today. And you have those guys to thank. And again, the staff, they went through staff in the building that you were either pulling in the right direction or you weren't. And like, to have that culture change throughout the whole building that we function in was pretty neat to see, because again, it was ugly when I first got there. So I got to give those two guys a ton of credit. They're probably the biggest influence. And I guess you've got us young guys, you have to have the right character people in the room too. Like, I wanted to be successful. These guys coming in like St. Louis, then you bring in a Dave Andrechuk who's still hungry, who has something to prove. Like, you had to have the right chemistry with the players, but the culture surrounding those players had to change first. And it's actually crazy how quickly it did, but everybody within the organization they kept around had something to prove. And it was the perfect storm. Like, us as players, we needed direction. We wanted to be told what to do. And John Tortorella was good at that. So he let you know exactly where you stood and what he needed out of you. And there was no mind games. It was like, yeah, you knew where you, and I got a story about that if you want me to share later.
I'd love to hear it. Love to hear it. What it's about.
Well, it was actually later on. We'd won our Stanley Cup, and then we were locked out for a year, which was a shame. Because our team was never the same after we lost. Javi Bulin went somewhere, and guys started filtering out, and we were kind of a shadow of ourselves when things got going again in 05-06. And I played 2 more seasons there. It was one of those 2 seasons I can't remember. We're just barely going to squeak into the playoffs kind of a team, and I'm not playing very good hockey. Our team's not playing very good hockey. And I'm coming up to Edmonton and Calgary, where I'm going to have tons of fans, family coming out from Saskatchewan to watch and all that stuff. And he pulls me aside. And I don't know what the rating on this podcast is, but I'll keep it clean. He's like, "You've been terrible." And he's like, "If you don't get better, I'm going to have to pull you out. And I know your family's coming and whatnot, but he's like, you're sucking." And I'm like, this is that pregame meal. I think, and I'm playing the Edmonton Oilers tonight. I've had my morning skate, and I'm like, oh, geez. Like, and I know I was pretty good self-assessment and could kind of know where my game was. And I knew I wasn't very good. And I'm like, oh, geez, like, now I'm going to get yanked, and I got all this family coming. This is going to be incredibly embarrassing. And he won't hesitate to do it. And then after he gave me just a face full of John Tortorella, he looked at me and he said, "You know what the problem is? You're still the best defenseman I have. So I got to put you in the lineup anyways, because these other guys are even worse than you." So you knew where you stood with John Tortorella. Like, there was no BS. It was like, get better or you're not playing.
Isn't that all you want as a player?
For me, it worked, because again, I generally knew where my game was. I had the coaches that liked to play mind games, and I had them particularly in Calgary. And it was, I think it made me grow as a human, like, to get through it. And you had to find some other tools in your toolbox, but I preferred it just direct.
Yeah. Yeah, what maybe just because you brought it up and recency bias now for everything I wanted to chat with you about, but the mind games. Can you give an example? Because sometimes minor hockey parents start talking about that, or sometimes these junior guys. Like, what would you define as a mind game, or maybe give an example of that, and then even if we take a step further, like what that tool in the toolbox needed to be developed, or what did you use in that scenario?
Well, Mike Keenan was my first real dose of it. And I was a free agent signed in Calgary. And then you're trying to live up to expectations of a larger contract. Um, just moved out of Tampa, where I was for 7 years. And then all of a sudden, you've got new teammates. Half of my teammates I had played in the Stanley Cup finals
You
3 years
did.
prior, which made things completely awkward. So I'm dealing with that as well. Then you're trying to prove yourself in a Canadian market, which is completely different than playing down in Tampa. So much more limelight, pressure, all that stuff. Well, Mike Keenan, it took me a long time to figure it out, but he wanted confrontation. He wanted you to stand up for yourself. He liked the in your face type of interaction. And I had never had that before. Like, I had complete and utter respect for all my coaches throughout junior. It was like, you're seen and you're not heard. That's the way that I grew up, like kind of with respect to elders, with respect to the people that were in charge. And I never really had to ever question it. And he wanted a reaction all the time. So I didn't even know what to do. My head was spinning. And it's the first time I've ever in my career, and I think it might have even taken me my second year with Mike, to go, and I had to tell him to F off. Like, I clearly remember my breaking point. I went in and I confronted him and I said, okay, here's the deal. You're going to piss off. You're not going to say a word to me for like the next 30 days. And this is like December or January of one of the seasons there that I played with him. And I was like, if I'm still awful after you've stopped riding me, you can ride me all the way to the end. I'm like, you can do whatever you want. You can bag me. You can do anything. But I'm like, get out of my face. Stop talking to me. Stop messing with my head, with the comments, with the stuff in the media. And to his credit, he actually let me play. I came along. I was playing with Mark Giordano. I think it was my second season in Calgary, and ended up having a really productive season. And we got to the playoffs again. I was a little bit injured going into the playoffs, but then when I was healthy, he inserted me into the lineup right away. And like, we'd kind of found some common ground. And I don't really like to admit it, but I almost wanted Mike Keenan to come back for another season, because I'd finally kind of sorted it out and proven myself to this guy. But it was exhausting. He came back on the plane one night and he'd had a few pops, and he starts spouting off. He's like, right in my face, and all the boys can see it. Whenever Mike Keenan came back on the plane, you knew he was looking for a target. I was his target. How much have you made in your career? Or what are you making this year? I'm like, I don't know, Mike. Like, what does it matter? And he's just all over me. He's like, it doesn't matter what you've made, but get out your checkbook and write a check for half and mail it to the Calgary Flames, because that's how often you've showed up this year. And he's just giving it to me in front of everybody. And everyone's snickering and laughing, and I can see them. And then he's like, hey, take a look around you. Look at this guy. He's pointing at Robin Regeer. This guy, zero offensive ability, but at least he works hard. And the boys are loving it. They're just cracking up on the plane. And I'm sitting there like just taking an earful. And he completely embarrasses me, berates me in front of all my teammates. But like, those were his tactics. That was him trying to get me going. And it just, little pokes, jabs. You just never knew where you stood with the guy. But it makes you stronger eventually. You don't know it at the time, or I guess it could probably completely break you down, but find a way to get through.
Did he have any tactics for anyone else, or is he a one size fits all kind of guy?
Well, he had like, I felt bad for Anders Eriksson, Bubba, him, and I forget who else it was. Like, he had his body fat line. I think it was like 8%. If you weren't below it, you were above it. You had fat rides after every practice. everything. So he had all sorts of different little things going on that were in his arsenal that he'd collected over the years, just to like make life miserable for some. And but I can't remember any examples, but even with our top players, they were always on edge. Like I know him and Jerome were like oil and water. And
Oh
I
yeah.
probably didn't see half of the interactions between them, but you knew those two weren't getting along. And I think that was ultimately Mike's demise in the end, even though I wanted to see him potentially come back for one more year because we had some structure and things going on. But I think that
We had,
was,
do you ever play for Bill Stewart, or do you know that name?
no, I don't know that name.
He was over here. He won a Calder Cup with the Flames, in the AHL. You know, he was a pretty accomplished coach, and he went overseas and coached there for quite some time in Germany. I played for him in Mannheim. So you got to even consider like that, right? Like guys that have gone over there at that point. I mean, you're still competitive and want to play, but you're in a different headspace than you are, you know, in North America.
For
Uh,
sure.
and he was like, you know, he was like a Mike Keenan, exactly. And I think that he probably read Mike's book or something by the sounds of it. And I hadn't figured that out yet either. Like to your point of like, what was he looking for? You know, and what he was looking for was a response. Like he wanted to be stood up to, even like threatened or confronted, right? Like he wanted to see that type of fire from you and that type of engagement. And like there was multiple times where he felt that like he pushed all the right buttons if the entire team like hated him or stood up to him or even as an
Mm-hmm.
individual, right? And the one time I was recovering from a concussion, first one I've ever had. Like I was out a month. I mean, have you ever gone through a concussion?
Yeah, I've had several, and my last one was my worst that knocked me out for probably close to a month as well.
So you know exactly how frustrating that is to come back from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the ups and
Yeah.
downs, and you feel you're getting better, and you're the only one that knows, right? That's the other thing too, right? Like there's symptoms that no one else can see. It's not like you have a bruise on your arm, or you got a cast, or you can take an X-ray, and so that accountability on the player is like it sucks because God, you want nothing more than be in the lineup. Yet you know your
Yeah.
head's not quite right, or you had that headache that you've been headache free for 3 days. Now on the fourth day you got the headache again, or whatever the case may be, right? And you have to be true to your body. But anyways, Bill was like, he ends up like he's riding me and essentially questioning my integrity, right? Like I was showering after a
Mm-hmm.
workout this one day, and he came in the shower and was like kind of barking at me and like, when are you going to F and play again? Like you know, I can't remember the words, but it was essentially like, yeah, I was sitting out on purpose, right? Was what he was trying to tell me. And boy, like I was like you, like I wouldn't say anything to a coach ever. I mean, they're your coach and you know, you respect them and yes sir, no sir, and that type of thing. And but that like he pushed me too far. And I got out of the shower, I went into his office and I was, yeah, I mean, in his face, like, don't question that. And if you ever question that, you mean then whatever, it's time for me to get out of here, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, yeah, that's exactly, you know, he essentially told me, like, gave me a Bill Stewart hug, that's exactly what he wanted to see from me. Right. And I thought that what I was
Yeah.
doing would essentially like end my career in Mannheim. And it was what gave me more respect with him. Right. It's kind of crazy, right? You talk about those mind
Yeah.
games. That's what he wanted to see, that I cared, you know, that I had this fire in me that I wanted to play. And that was his proof, because I was willing to stand up in front of him. It's like bonkers sometimes, right?
How was your relationship after that?
Oh, good. I mean, that's what I mean. He kind of went away, right? Like, cause he's
Yeah.
kind of like you proved yourself to him, and now he trusts you, essentially, right? Is kind of how it seemed like to me.
Yeah, that was the exact same experience I had. And I was just so used to coaches as well. Like you knew where they stood because they used to like punish you on the ice. They'd bag you or take away your days off or stuff like that, right? So you
Yeah.
knew, like, as a team, you kind of knew where you stood. So it was a completely different experience for me. And then Bob Hartley, he was a whole nother ball of wax, but very similar to Keenan in so many regards. And um, yeah, I don't know. You look back at a lot of the coaches you had, and I prefer, again, direct, straight. And the one thing that John Tortorella I don't think does the best is probably away from the rink. The human relationship is there, but at the rink, it's all business. And I think like you look at some of these guys, I've never been in the dressing room with them, but like a John Cooper or a Joel Quenneville, they've got to be able to relate kind of on all levels with their players. I think this day and age, to have the success that they had and do the things that they've done, that old school just beat it out of the players doesn't quite work anymore. I
No,
don't
yeah, and
think.
it's not a one size fits all. That's the thing. Like I think like the good coaches, and maybe there's a few guys that they really respond to that, right? And really, that's what you're trying to do as a coach. I mean, right? You're trying to get the best of everybody in the group, and everyone's going to respond differently to different things, and you kind of got to find your way. Sounds like you played for some beauties, though. Holy Hartley, Keenan, Tortorella. That's wild. That's like
Yeah,
that's like 3 of the top 10 probably.
yeah, it was. Yeah, that was quite the ride in Calgary, let me tell you.
Yeah.
I had Brent Sutter for 3 years as well. So he was, but again, you have a Brent Sutter, and then, well, behind the scenes with Mike Keenan and Brent was Daryl was our GM, Daryl Sutter. So never had Daryl as a coach, but he might as well have been coaching for the amount he was around the dressing room. So, and then
Right.
you mentioned earlier Rick Dudley as a GM, and like no communication with you. Well, he traded for me, and he was the guy that was always around the dressing room in Tampa. He was down there working out. Like he'd be working out at the same time as the guys, and then he'd showering with the guys. Like, yeah, like you go in there after going skate, going there. Oh, hey, Duds, have his flip flops on, and then he had the. I know that his I believe his wife was into like some Asian culture and feng shui and all that stuff. He had candles burning in his office, and he had all sorts of incense all over the rink. And he had some really other crazy ideas. Like he took our ping pong table and painted the ping pong table white and the ball black to simulate the ice and the puck. Stuff like this. Like that's what I walked into at Tampa. It was like the Twilight Zone a little bit. So,
oh my gosh, that's wild.
but this fierce, fiery competitor, right? Like that's Rick Dudley in a nutshell. When you saw coaching little video excerpts of like him as a coach, just losing his mind on the bench with players, and you heard about him as a GM in Detroit, and then this big fiery guy with all these candles lit and incense burning everywhere. So.
fighting his own yin and yang there, hey?
Yeah.
Was he the one who hired Tortorella?
Yes, he was.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
him and Ludwig had success in Detroit, and he brought Ludwig up to coach. But then Tortorella was in. Brad Shaw came up. I had him as an assistant coach. But a lot of those Buffalo ties, Buffalo Sabres connections, Rochester. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned, I just met back earlier. You mentioned like getting rid of like anyone that wasn't kind of pulling the same direction. And that even meant like team staff and arena staff. And it just rung so true with a recent conversation I had with Brent Gilchrist, who was in Montreal at the beginning. And he spoke so fondly of his experience there, just because like he said, everything about that whole place was about winning. You know, when he was there, like from the veterans to the trainers to the aisle guys, like it was all just about winning. Like that's what everyone wanted to do, and that's what the whole direction was. And he spoke to that as a piece of the culture. And I think that most people, like especially the casual fan for sure, would never think that it runs that deep. You know, like that when you step into a place, you can kind of feel the difference. You know, and for you to see that change in Tampa there, and with the players that you had, I think that's such a compelling story. Like, for one, like I want to bring that back to a Martin St. Louis, which I got him on my list, and I've been able to text with him, and I think maybe at the end of this year I'll be able to have him on as a guest, because there's so many things that just fascinate me about him, like his journey through Calgary and being told that he'd never be an NHL player, and his dominance at the AHL level, but even when he came up, right, like. He was nothing against 30 points in the NHL or 40 points, right? But he wasn't a Hart Trophy winner. He wasn't an Art Ross guy. And then he turned into this, one of the best players, if not the best player in the world for a few years. And you saw that, like how, like not only is the team changing in front of you, but you're also seeing the development of players like Martin St. Louis become stars kind of in front of your eyes. Like what was the transition like for you? with Martin St. Louis? Like, I would assume you didn't think, your first year there with him, you're like, oh, this guy's going to win the Hart Trophy in 6 years.
Well, as a young guy, like in coming from Buffalo, you're seen and you're not heard. So I didn't even know how to interact like with coaches, with like to try to maximize your experience as a pro. And when Marty came in, and a lot of the guys that I played with there, you mentioned like Marty wasn't a Art Ross winner, or well, the trophies that he won and the career that he had. Maybe not in the exterior, but in the interior, that guy, like one of the most driven individuals ever. So you see him get hired on as the Montreal Canadiens coach, and I'm like, if there's someone that's gonna like defy the odds, well, they've got the right guy, because he's already done it in his career. It's what's been his driving force, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if you asked him, he'd probably say like being slighted and hearing comments and things like that was probably fuel for his fire. But I've never seen a guy work that hard in the gym. He was continually. I thought he maybe had a bit of spot of brown on his nose because he was always in Tortorella's office, but he was just trying to make our team better. He was in there. They were continually discussing what to do on the power play. Like Marty didn't penalty kill a lot, but that power play was first and foremost. That thing was going to succeed. They were continually watching video. Like that's the other thing. Video was unheard of. Me, like coach in Buffalo, Lindy Ruff, would show like 4 clips every now and then. I got to Tampa, and when Tortorella took over, full doses. Just like we watched video after video after video, and good stuff and bad stuff. And it was really, it helped us a lot. Like we'd sit in there as a team and hunker down and watch video for 10 or 15 minutes. And you just pray to God you weren't like a highlight reel for all the wrong reasons, because some days you could be, excuse me. But no, that was Marty St. Louis. He was like pushing the edge as a pro, and I'd never really seen it or experienced before. I was too naive to see it in Buffalo. Like in Buffalo, we had one trainer, and he was Jim Pizzatelli, and he was looking after Dominic Hasek, and everybody else just kind of filed in after that. And I never saw the training room. He'd point at me and show me where the tape was, where the heat packs were, and it was self-service, right? So like I didn't really know the inner workings of a hockey club and what was going to give you success. I was just there with eyes as big as saucers, just being excited to be in a lineup and go out on the ice with the Buffalo Sabres. I got to figure it out in Rochester because I was able to absorb more and figure out what the process was to be a pro. But again, back to Martin St. Louis, like what he was eating was important to him. And I should have probably clued in a little sooner. Might have helped the guy in his career move along if I would have paid a little more attention. It was kind of funny, like when you talk about working out as a pro, and that changed a lot from the start of my career to the end of my career. I think Marty was one of the guys that like was ahead of the curve there. And maybe that's from his college. He was one of the first like real, him and Dan Boyle, college kids that I played with. I think they had a much different experience than us junior kids. I used to go in the weight room, splash a little water on myself and call it a day because no one was really paying attention to what you were doing. So,
yeah, so you think so for him, because like he was definitely proven at the minor league level, but never really, whatever. I don't want you to say, wasn't really a point producing at the NHL level. And I think he was potentially maybe, and this is from the outside looking in, like trying to find out what type of an NHLer he could be, right? If he was even able to kind of be an NHLer, because when he got to Tampa, there was a lot of people that didn't think he could be, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that there was, and for me, like being the mindset guy that's really interested in this stuff, do you think that there was that, like that he always believed that he could get it done? Like that was like, that was where 100%. It came from?
Yeah. There's no doubt in his mind. I don't think ever. That'd be an interesting question to ask him. At one point, did you ever feel like it wasn't going to happen? But I don't think he ever believed that. He's just out there to prove people wrong. I think the reason he worked so hard was he knew, like, obviously the game was a different game and you played in it. It was clutch and grab it was ugly hockey. And to be a small player, to be able to fight through that, like, he is built like a brick house. His lower body is just, it's like, it was, like I said, his bottom layer, like, and it was so powerful, and it had to be, to skate, to power through the corners, to fight through the checks, because you didn't get to freewheel back then.
Yeah.
So he was probably focusing on that. And then obviously it's a product of the guys you play with. He had some great setup guys. He played with a lot of guys that could finish. Like, we didn't have another otherworldly team, but we had a group of young guys that were hungry too, and kind of all on the same page. And that was timing as far as his career taking off as well. But he's always had something to prove. Right. There's no doubt about that.
That's cool. I want to talk with you just because there is, whether you're a U15 player or a junior player or a pro, figuring out who you are as a player. You talked about self-assessment earlier. I think that's a massive skill and something that I try and work with my younger players on, and to develop that, be as unbiased as we can, be as honest as we can with our self-assessment of where we need to be and where we currently are. But in that whole conversation, I think there's a conversation about player identity. And I'm never one to put a ceiling on anybody, because I'm from the growth mindset side of things. Like, we can always get better at whatever it is we want to get better at, but we still need to understand what we are, and what a team needs from us and how we be valuable. So for someone like you, who, you look at a stat line, right, is like, well, the hockey card doesn't look amazing, right? Like, lots of games played, but not a ton of goals, not a ton of points, right? And that's sometimes hard, because especially as a younger player, as a junior player, like, you want to be offensive. Like, most of us want to be, right? Like, you want to make an impact on the score sheet. Yet, and this is the conversation that I try and have with these players who I feel are like, great defenders, great ability of breaking up plays, getting the puck out of their zone in some scenarios. I'm like, people need you. Teams need you, right? And you can play for a long time doing that. But did you ever have that, your own personal kind of, whether it be a struggler or not, but like the type of player you were, the type of player you needed to be, and just being able to embrace that?
Well, I just wanted to make one quick comment. Like what you say, it's a tough day and age to tell anybody to do anything that isn't offensive, right? It's a tough sell in today's game. Like, I just finished coaching a bunch of 13 and 14-year-olds, and all they care about is producing at the other end of the ice. And a lot of them don't even have the skills to do it, but that's what they see because they watch hockey. And it's like, you have so much other stuff that you could offer. But the defensive side of the game is I think it's a hard sell at the pro level, at all levels right now. Like, it's taken such a shift to one side. But back to your initial question, no, my identity was pretty clear. When someone told me, like, at 12 and 13, like, I was always the odd number years. So I guess we would have been U14, but I call it 13 and under, 15 and under. But 13 and under, they told me you could start to, like, body check people legally. I'm like, I'm in. Like, you can run over somebody, and like, it was, I don't know why I got such a thrill out of it, but that started forming my identity. And I was built like a toothpick. I was my whole life. Like, I wasn't that tall, but just the skinniest kid you'll ever find. So I tried to run over everything and everybody, and I failed miserably at times. At the age of 13, I played Pee Wee, or U14. And then I also played Bantam. So I played with the 14 and 15-year-olds. And then I played some midget games as 16 and 17-year-old, because I'm from small town where I played hockey, 1,200 people. We barely had enough guys to make a hockey team. But like, playing against those bigger kids and getting run over, and that it's a quick learning curve. But I mean, I was going to be physical first and foremost, and I hated getting scored on. Like, I don't know what happened to me, but somewhere along the way, I scored a lot of goals, I think, when I was younger, and I was supposed to be like one of the better players on my team, because again, in small town, you've got probably one or two AA players on your team, and then you've got all the way down to D. or tier 4 players, all on the same team. So ice time's not fair. I'm sure some kids had a miserable upbringing in minor hockey. I fortunately was kind of for a time at the top there, and especially as a 13-year-old, and was the goal scoring guy. But there was something that clicked in me about not getting scored on. It drives me nuts. Like, my defensive spider senses when I watch NHL games go off, and you see these phenomenal goals by these highly offensive, talented players, but then you look at the guy defending who's staring at the puck and not doing his job, and it just drives me nuts. I lose my mind because it's so simple. If you just stayed in front of the guy, he had nothing. And there is no highlight reel goal. But we don't get to show those examples on the evening highlights. So
I know.
As a 14-year-old, I was at a bit of a crossroads. We joined towns with another team. I hadn't really grown. I was used to playing with like 2 different teams and having all this ice time. And as a 14-year-old, I hardly played. I was like a 6th defenseman, which we never had 6 defensemen. We were lucky to have 4.
Right.
And so it felt like I was never playing. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm probably not going to be a hockey player. I was really kind of depressed. And I got to thank Chad Allen's dad, Mac Allen. He just out of nowhere, I think, mentioned to the Saskatoon Blades that they should invite me to their rookie camp. And I ended up playing my way onto their 50-man protected list. I remember going as a 15-year-old, going to a midget AAA camp for the Saskatoon Contacts. And you talk about self-assessment, I was awful. But I had been put on this list by the Saskatoon Blades because I did have a pretty good showing at their rookie camp. And for some reason, I stayed in this midget AAA camp and somehow ended up playing midget AAA as a 15-year-old, where I look back, I don't think I had any business being there if you just judge me on my training camp. But that was another issue, or another just kind of an example of timing. Like, I think because the Blades had put me on as their 50th man, they were going to have this AAA club look at me and really take a long look. And I got more looks than I probably should have, and finally took advantage of it in the end. So I had some moments as a 14-year-old where I hated hockey, and it was just miserable because it wasn't the norm for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to do some growing there. And as a 15-year-old, kind of the fire came back. And then the other point in my career where I probably didn't do a very good job of self-assessment and was a little bit lazy was probably near the end. I should have probably been watching more video on myself and been still trying to improve your game and stay in the game more. But like, this is when video has got to where it is now, where I think you overdose on it. You're watching so much video, and I was so like I didn't want anything to do with technology. I remember Rob Cookson in Calgary saying, like, bring your iPad so I can put this app on your iPad so you can watch all of yourself all the time. And I'm like, oh, I forgot it again, Rob. On next road trip, I'll bring it in. Oh, shoot, forgot it again. Like, I was of the mindset that I knew where my game should be, and I was kind of old school that way. I probably could have used to make some progress at the end of my career. I think it was a little bit detrimental.
Right.
I was a little bit foolish there in not taking advantage of a few tools around me. So.
Yeah, and that is the mindset around that, right? I love the like Zdeno Chara seemed to be a great example of just somebody who continued to push and continued to try and get better, like, all the time, right? I mean, to play the however many thousand, I don't even know how many games, lost count, but
yeah.
like, I mean, he obviously played himself into a Norris Trophy winner too, right? I mean, I remember him at the junior level and his first couple of years pro, and he could barely cross over. You know what I mean? Like, I'm obviously exaggerating, but my God, did he develop his game? And I think it was just that approach, to continue to get better. And I was from a fixed mindset when it comes to my skill too. Like, I was always like a super skilled player, and I just thought that was kind of, you had it or you didn't. Like, that was where my mindset was. So like, to go and think you would practice it didn't really even cross my mind, right? And plus, we were kind of from the era where skills coaches didn't exist.
No.
Like there was no such thing as going to a skills practice. And yeah, so I mean, to think that in the summer I'd be working on my hands or something, that didn't even, I worked my tail off in the gym and all that other stuff, right, to try and get physically stronger. But as far as getting better from a skill side, I didn't even contemplate that, right? So definitely there was room for me personally to grow more as a player, and I could see that towards a long NHL career like yourself, that you could kind of get stuck in the rut a little bit, right?
Terrible skater. I should have been doing everything in my power to improve my skating, but I was too stubborn. I was like, I've had this argument before. I think you are blessed with some God-given talents, and mine was not skating. And I think I could have probably improved it slightly. But again, like when I'm running wide open, I'm probably still the slowest guy on the team. It's like, how do you really improve that? Like, am I going to make leaps and bounds? Is a quarter second on my full ice sprint, is it really gonna? So I don't know. I was maybe a little bit closed-minded on that stuff.
Right. Where could what is it worth? Is the effort worth it? Is what I have to put in to get out. Brad Larson was actually a great interview, and he talked about the last 7%. And he said, like, the last 7% is the hardest percent that you're ever going to make, but it's also going to make the biggest difference at the highest level. It's like that, like the way he framed that, he's like, you have to work so hard at the end to get the most out of yourself. But he said those gains are the ones that he was most proud of on a personal level, and what he tries to get his players to do. But again, that's a complete approach, right? Like whether because it's a lot of investment to get that last part, right? So it's like, well, is it worth it or isn't worth it?
The one thing when they took clutching and grabbing out of the game after the 03-04 season, and we saw like 110 penalty shots the next year, like when we came back in 05-06, because you couldn't put your stick on anybody. Well, that was an eye opener for me. Like I had an unbelievable can opener. Like that was my go-to move. That was gone. Then you couldn't hook guys. So you couldn't run at guys because you couldn't hook yourself back into a play. So that's where I did at least have the wherewithal. Like I have to get lighter, because I think that was going to improve a little bit of my skating and foot speed and agility. So I dropped about 7 or 8 pounds, and I was never a big guy. Like I was probably playing at 215, 216, but I'm like, I've got to get down to a point where I can keep up a little better, because like I'm a crappy skater. I at least kind of realized I got to stay in the game somehow. So you try to advance with the game or stay with the game to the best of your ability. But
right, no, that's a tough
stubborn in some regards.
Guys. Yeah, because the game went from a bigger, stronger, right, like hook, hold,
no red line
power game, right, and a lot of defensemen had to adjust. I mean, so great on you for being able to do it. That's same with the goalies. Like the goalies transition from that kind of like that stand up sort of style to everyone playing the butterfly style. Interviewing Kevin Weeks, like doing that mid-career, right, to really reinvent your style was like a challenge, right? And some guys could do it and some guys didn't. And now the game is completely different. I was laughing about you talking about the defensive side. Like it's at the NHL level, like it's bonkers to me how poor it is, like the majority of the time right now, like defensive zone coverage. Not that I was an amazing defender, but like it looks to me like I'm like, as a goal scorer who didn't necessarily take pride in my defense, like I think I get it more than half these guys in the NHL.
Yeah, you're probably way ahead of the curve. Because it was talked about more. I was just having this discussion the other day. The Calgary Flames have gone to like 15 overtime losses. I'm like, half of those should have never gone to overtime, but they're so bad in their own end because no one commits to it. They're all worried about going to outscore the other team instead of when you have a third period lead or late in the second period, like trying to lock it down a little bit. But that's no one's mindset anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And I understand there's the saying out there, how does it go? Check, don't defend. I'm still kind of like, you got to have a little healthy balance of both. Yeah. Right? Yeah, there's a time to go and check, and you have moved the puck down to the other end. But when you're in your own end, you have to know how to defend. And everyone runs around, and I see three guys in the corner and everyone leaving the net front. It just like, I'm like, oh my God. Like, I understand there's a time and a place to pressure. There's a time and a place just to stay up front too, because that's where the goal is going to be scored.
Yeah. Yeah, the puck
And
watching, it was bonker. It's just crazy to me
oh,
watching how everyone's watching it all the time, and again that one spot in the slot where like that's where it's going to be coming. Like nobody sees the guy there, and I'm like, this is the NHL, people. I don't really understand how we're doing this consistently.
I tell my kids, defensemen, like if your toe caps are facing the end boards, you're in deep shit. Like you're in one because you have no clue what's going on behind you. So like it's as simple as that positioning. But you watch an NHL game, they're all just staring at what's going on below the goal line. I'm like, nothing happens down there. Like it's all gonna happen right back behind you.
You know what? And then I watched that guy, and I can't remember his name right now, but the big guy, a big new guy that just got called up from the minors for the Oilers.
French name. Yeah, we're talking about the same guy.
Yeah, we're talking about the same guy, big guy. But I watched him the other night, and I mean, it's fun to watch the Oilers. I mean, you got that group of players out there that's you never know what you're going to get with them. But I watched him play, and I was like, it just made me smile because like it is not comfortable to be around him in Edmonton zone. You know what I mean? Like it's that old school approach to the net front. Like he's not letting guys get behind him. Like he's boxing them out before they even get there. There's an extra hack on the way out of the rink. You know what I mean? That anytime somebody goes in his space, there's a shot. Like he's hard to play against. And for me in our era, I just love seeing that still exists in some capacity. And I also love the idea that it's like it shows how valuable it can still be, right? Like a player like that now, like I'm just such an advocate for it because a lot of these guys don't know how to handle it.
Yeah, well, it's like, yeah, they're soft as butter, some of those forwards out there now. So I actually enjoy, I was watching McAvoy, and I don't get to see him play enough, but watching the Bruins this year, like he's got grit to his game. He's really well positioned, and he probably took a few notes off of old Zdeno Chara before he packed it in, right? Like he's doing a great job out there. The other smaller guy that I enjoy is Pionk with the Jets. He runs everybody. He doesn't let anybody come through his crease without getting whacked or hacked. And I'm like that's how it should be.
Yeah.
And there's a certain level of like what you can and can't get away with. And the one thing that you can still get away with that NHL linesmen will let you do and refs let you is boxing out before guys get to the front of your net. And defensemen are so poor at it. Like they get positioned, and now you get the double screen in front where they'll allow you to have that little battle. That's the little bit of interference you can still run in the game of hockey, and guys don't take advantage of it.
Yeah, I know, and it's such a valuable asset. And talk to the goalies, right? My gosh, like if they can see that seam, like so much nicer. I mean, just from a strategy standpoint, I usually don't go there, but like, what is it with your opinion? Because it seems like a vast majority of the teams have switched that the defenseman will front the forward in front of their net. And I don't like, what is do you know what the advantage is there? Like, what is the even theory behind that?
I mean, if you can block a shot, you're at an advantage, but there's no way I want to be behind someone trying to lift their stick as a defenseman. If the shot gets through and there's a rebound, I don't hardly stand a chance.
Right.
You have enough strength or quickness or wherewithal. I just think it completely puts you at a disadvantage. I actually don't really agree with it. It's a fine line you walk as a defenseman and not screening your own goaltender. Like I remember Hasek just screaming at me, must see, because you don't want to be, and I guess sometimes, but it used to be bigger, stronger guys and some of the third and fourth liners that were really hard to move. But I don't really see that in today's game. Yeah, these guys are strong and good skaters, but you should be able to get under a guy's stick and push him out of the way a little bit for your goaltender if you apply yourself. I don't know. Maybe I'm just losing touch as well, but I understand. I kind of watch the new age penalty kill where everyone's going all the time and the forwards are flipping underneath each other high in the zone and it's high pressure. And I don't mind that, but it's still that the defenseman, like when three offensive players are like in a corner, that all three defenders have to go in there too. I mean, yes, when you're surprising guys, I see it happen very successfully at the NHL level, but then you see it where guys are a step slow or They have no business, again, like we just mentioned, going into the corner. I
Yeah.
just think the teams that do it the best still make reads. It's just not an automatic that we're all going in there to get the puck, or now it's time to chase in our own end. Like, you watch the teams that play the structure, like Boston. You watch the Golden Knights the other night that are pretty good in their own end. Like, there's not a lot of chase. They're still at times holding their ground and positioning. Yeah, they know
Yeah.
when to force, and they read. Maybe they're just a little smarter. Maybe they read the plays better, and that comes down to individuals.
Where
I'm
do you
not
think? Do you think that
100%.
that's just like? I mean, coaches can't not appreciate defense anymore. Do you think it's harder in this day and age to get their players to be accountable to defense?
I think it does come down to like the individuals you have out there, because you look at, just use for a small example, this year there's I'm not even going to name names, the defender on the Calgary Flames. I thought last year he made leaps and bounds in being great in his own end, and now this year I don't know if he feels he needs to go and be more offensive, and doesn't still have the mindset that it should be take care of my own end first, but he's had gaping holes in his game. And I think that comes down to, again, it is the individual. It's the mindset that you're in. And if that's not like second nature to you, or if it's not your focus, I don't think you can beat that into people. I think you can at an early age, but if you've gone through the ranks and you get to like where you're halfway through your pro career and you've been caught in between offense and defense, or you've always viewed yourself as that player, I think it could probably be a struggle. Like, I had a little flash of offense in the end of junior just because I was bigger and stronger than guys and had experience. I had a little bit of success in Rochester at like playing on the second power play, and then all that went away. And because I knew who I was,
Yeah.
and it wasn't to help at the offensive end of the rink.
And that
So
was fine for you, right? I think part of it has to be like
yeah,
that the player is okay with it, right? I mean, you said you took a passion in keeping goals out. And I guess that's just what I try and like why I even asked you that in the first place is that I think that there is absolutely nothing wrong at all with embracing that. And I think that those that do, and especially in today's game, like actually have a competitive advantage. Like you're not the front page, like you're not going to be the first round probably pick in the WHL draft or whatever, but you still get recognized as being somebody that a team needs. And there's fewer and fewer people that want to do that, So I think that there is an advantage.
and Erica Branson last year for the Calgary Flames, watching him a ton. Everyone's like, well, this guy hasn't quite found himself. He hasn't lived up to expectations. Well, I think he was thought coming out of junior and signing these big contracts that he was going to be at both ends of the rink, a stud on offense and a stud on defense. Last year, all the Calgary Flames wanted him to do was block shots, be good in your own end. I was sad to see him leave and go to Columbus this year because he was such a big piece to their success last year. And you can't just go and replace that and find guys like that. But everyone's like, oh my God, Erica Branson, the second coming of Erica Branson. No, I think he just finally was allowed to be who he is and what he's good at. And there was no pressure to be anything but himself. And he got the most out of himself last year. It was really neat to see.
Yeah.
I was thoroughly impressed, and I'm always
Was.
rooting for the defensive plugs. So
A little bit of bias there, hey?
I gotta go in reverse. His name's come up, Zdeno Chara, like a physical specimen, obviously adapted with the game. You weren't kidding when this guy came in the league. I played one of the first games against him, Prince George Cougar. They've sewed an extension, like an extra ring on the bottom of his jersey. And he's got a knob in his stick that's probably 14 inches long because we were all using aluminum sticks back then. And I was like, is this some kind of circus act? Is this a joke? Like, what's going on here? Like, this can't be real.
Yeah.
And then one of the smaller, sort of tough guys on our team thought that he was going to maybe beat up Zdeno Chara too, as we were having a good chuckle in the dressing room and laughing at him because he tripped all over himself. He wasn't a great skater. He was uncoordinated. He was not a good-looking hockey player. Well, Zdeno closed both of my teammates' eyes that night. We found out Zdeno was pretty tough right off the hop. We didn't make fun of that again, but from where he started and where he got to, it shows that hard work can accomplish a hell of a lot. So he was a prime example.
Yeah. An incredible example. Because like you said, like if you could find game tape of that, like there you couldn't find somebody. Like what were the Vegas odds on him being a Norris Trophy winner, right? Like give me a
Oh,
break. He could barely play. He probably just shouldn't even have played in the WHL at the time, right? Like it wasn't even close. But yeah, I mean, I love that. I love those stories. I love those rises. I love seeing people develop. And again, like with a skill set that, yeah, no, he wasn't running around toe dragging people, but he was a very, very good puck mover. He ended up to be. He could handle a puck. I mean, he could move a puck. He increased his vision. Like there were so many aspects of his game that improved with him obviously because of a willingness to get better and a curiosity about his game, ability to self-assess and continue to improve. And those are all things that put a huge smile on my face, and obviously a massive amount of respect for the guy too, right? To be able to accomplish all
I
that stuff.
I think he started a bit of a trend though in the NHL too, like, or maybe it was just a trend that was already happening. Every training camp I went to, though, there was always these big, like, can't skate. I probably put myself in that category. I think I was a little more agile than some of the guys I played with, but these big, lumbering, 240-pound defensemen that they thought they were going to like turn into NHL prospects. I feel like you just saw them at all training camps there for like 5 to
Right.
10 years in a row. I feel like that was the Zdeno Chara effect. We're just going to take the biggest guys we can draft and like the Hatcher brothers, and we're going to they're going to become NHL rocks back there in defense. And so
Right.
many of them were just so awful. Like you still have to have some hockey sense and a little bit of ability. You got to have a
Yeah.
bit of a blend.
For
So
you, Corey, I mean, you mentioned yourself as kind of the prototypical old school rookie, right? Just sitting in the locker room and soaking it up and not saying much to anybody and just appreciating the moment. Um, at some place during that process, I mean, you become an established NHL veteran and you become a leader and you become somebody that's supposed to be helping young guys. Like at what point do you remember a moment in time? Was there a game or a situation or just a feeling where you're like, hey, I've made it. You know, I'm here now. And now you kind of like shifted your direction on how you were operating within that team.
well, the first time I felt like I actually made it was probably at the start of the 02-03 season in Tampa. Like I'd been there for 2 seasons prior, had stints down in the minors, but I kind of just looked around and I think I was 24 years old and I was like, okay, you know how to do everything. Still as a defenseman, you're learning a lot at a young age, but I was like, I'm doing things better than a lot of my competitors. I'm watching these guys, like some of the guys I'm out there with, not learning from their mistakes, and I am like I don't know. I just finally felt like that at the start of that season. Like I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. I'm on the day one roster, and I'm staying here all year. There's going to be no stints up, no stints down. I'd finished the season strong the year before, and that for me, it was just like the first time I could breathe easy and didn't feel like there was always that looming threat of being sent down, because that's the tactic that teams used. It was like you're going to the minors, like we're gonna scare you into playing better. I don't know if I wanted to mention, we were talking earlier, Jason. The way my first contract was structured when I signed my entry level deal, my minor league salary went in reverse. I think I made like $70,000 my first year, 60 my second, and 45 my third. They called it incentive to get out. And so I'd actually played out that entry level contract, had signed another contract, and just the interest of Tampa, or that they had in me, and just kind of them showing that they were invested in me too. That gave me a little bit more peace of mind as well. But the start of that 02-03 season, I was like, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm staying here. It wasn't one particular moment where I was like, I'd had enough. I was sick and tired of like being rattled mentally, and I was just like, I'm just going to play. And I think if I go out there and do my job, I'll stay here. So,
Yeah,
um,
because isn't that That's the battle, right? And I think for everyone it's kind of different. Some guys just show up, right, with the swagger and the belief that this is where they're supposed to be and like they're in the right spot. And some guys have to play their kind of way into that. And um, but it is a very big component of the ability to play at that level, right? Like where you feel you are sitting, right? Are you feeling a part of the group? Or are you feeling like you're, on the outside and at any moment you can get
Yeah.
let go? Um, but yeah, I mean, and then once that happened for you, did you start? Because now we're talking about longevity, right? And to play 900 games, like you have to not only be a good player, but I believe you probably have to transition into a role where you're helping others, right? Like that's actually like a focus of yours, and you're worried about the room. Did that happen for you at any point where you felt like now you're taking care of some of these younger guys and helping them along?
It probably didn't happen until honestly, like the very last year of my career, and it's something I regret. Um, I regret that I didn't speak up enough. I regret that I didn't value myself enough as an asset in the locker room. I always thought like in Tampa I didn't really have to. Like we had Dave Anderchuk there, and we had all these budding superstars like Martin St. Louis, and I voiced my opinion, and I always voiced my opinion from a very defensive standpoint. And we had some really candid conversations, but I always felt like I was in the background there. I think I said a little bit more in my last year in Tampa because I was all of a sudden like a 27-year-old, 28-year-old. I had been around, I had a chance to have some success. And so I was trying to help those younger guys, but I always just felt as a guy who was just a defensive defenseman, I didn't have anything to offer at the other end of the rink generally. I always felt it a really tough spot to speak up over the guys that were either contributing at both ends, like for example, like a Dan Boyle could do it at both ends, or like a Daryl Sador. I played with him and utmost respect because he was so good at both ends of the rink. It's like how do I talk ahead of this guy? Or how do I tell my offensive players that they need to be better in their own end? Because they're like, well, you can't do jack at the other end of the rink. So why would we listen to you? Um, in Calgary, I got there. I was just trying to fit myself in at the start and not be an outsider because of the history between me and some of my teammates with a Stanley Cup series against each other prior to that.
Right.
And then at my end of my time in Calgary, I was battling with coaches. I was just battling to be in the lineup. And how do you? I know Dave Anderchuk wrestled with it at the end of his career, being inserted in and out of the lineup, being our captain. And how do you lead a team when now you're not the guy, right? And for me, the end of my time in Calgary, it was like that. I was scrapping to stay in the lineup. How do I lead a team? How does anyone take me with a grain of salt because I'm not in the lineup every night?
Right.
And so my last year in Denver was kind of a little bit of a resurgence. Patty Wadden, I don't think knew anything about me. I had a good training camp. We started off that season like 12-1-0, and we just ran with it. And our team, we had so much fun. I played with the likes of Landeskog, McKinnon, Ryan O'Reilly, Matt Duchene, like all these super talented kids. And it was just my turn to speak up as an older player. Like there was no denying it. J.S. Jaguar was there in the room. He was probably our biggest voice. And he was a guy too that was barely playing because Varlamov was in the net every night. But he knew his role and he had the respect. And, he was a Conn Smythe winning goaltender. That helps too. People will listen. But I took the role on that year to help out. And it was very rewarding as an older player, like to help keep young guys accountable. And Landeskog was a great leader even at a young age. Like I didn't have that much of an impact, but just sharing and keeping guys focused. It was a really good feeling. And I have regrets. I have regrets about my second year World Junior. Jesse Wallen and I were the only returnees. Breaks his foot. I'm given the captaincy. We were a hot mess. I didn't say enough. I didn't do enough to try and affect that. I felt like I was the 19th player, 20th player on the roster, not ever see myself really in that leadership role. So,
Right.
and I have regrets. Knowing what I know now, I'm probably too outspoken now. Should probably just shut my mouth and assume the role that I used to have. But should have done more of it then. Like, why wait? Maybe it would have had an impact.
Right.
Maybe it, but what's the doesn't hurt to try.
Sure. Where
And
do you think, like, it sounds to me like you're kind of a bit devalued yourself. I mean, whether from a human level or from a player level, do you think that was like, do you think that's what, like, was it kind of, was it part of your DNA? Was it bred into you? Was like, where would you have shifted that focus now if you could go back?
it's like, well, it's like you're seen and not heard. There's kind of a chain of, there's a pecking order, right? Like it starts your first couple days in the WHL. You start
Yeah.
packing the bus,
Yeah.
and that's what you did. And you definitely kept your mouth shut then if you didn't want to attract any excess attention
Right.
as a young guy. And for me, it was a very similar experience in Rochester as well. And it's just like maybe a product of your environment.
Right.
Um, and then it's I don't know. I get probably devalued myself a little bit. My best years were probably from 24 to 32. That's where I had the most confidence. I lacked it at the end of my career, except for
Yeah.
that maybe that last season. So it's very fleeting. It's like, where do you fit in on your team? Um, but yeah, how about yourself? Feel like a leader? Did you get to lead some teams?
Um, well, I wore a letter here and there, right? I can't even remember where now. I don't have a good memory for that. Was always somewhere near the top of the scoring of teams that I was on, if not the top. So I mean, you kind of get bestowed a leadership-ish role, right, in those
For sure.
scenarios. Um, so definitely knew that I was an influence. Like I mean, I had the self-awareness to understand that. Um, I was always, I mean, I love being around the boys. Like that wasn't, an issue, as far as, connecting or making relationships. I think for me, and I'm just guessing, like I wasn't the stoic in the room, Mr. Serious leader. And I think, when you look at, whether you look at, movies or, you hear stories of guys, like that's kind of how you see a leader to be, right? Like the Mr.
Yeah.
Serious will step up and say the right thing at the right time, and he's all business all the time. And for me, that wasn't how I played my best hockey. I mean, quite frank, right? I was somebody that I came to the rink kind of, if we were supposed to be there 2 hours before, I'd come there 2 hours before, because that's like, I didn't need to be there all day, right? I actually would get tight, and I would get like, there'd be different things that would happen to me
I
mentally
was the same way.
that wouldn't allow me to play my best. So I think from that side, I was kind of an unconventional leader that probably most coaches maybe didn't want, right? Because I'm the one running the stereo in the room, right? And I'm the one who's tapping my foot and dancing before the game, right? Like, so yeah, so to say, I think I had my place in most of the locker rooms, and I think I was kind of that guy that kept some levity to it, for the most
Yeah.
part. But yeah, I mean, I didn't. What I mean, we're talking about kind of helping people. Like, I think I was just always tried to be a good human. I didn't actually think of the game in like a way of like, hey, I'm going to help this kid become a better player. But I was just trying to be as inclusive as I could all the time. I think that was sort of a part of who I was in my leadership role. And I thought if we were hanging out together as a group and if we were having fun as a group, we we're probably going to play well as a group. So I think that's probably where my leadership style came from.
Yeah, you're making me think of more things. You're kind of sparking some thoughts internally. I was the guy. I always felt like I didn't have enough talent, and I'm pretty sure I did, to get by on that alone. So I was so focused on, when I finally got a taste and got my foot in the door, on staying there. I was probably a little too serious. I wish I would have enjoyed myself a little bit more, but I just didn't think that I could afford to. Like, I couldn't afford to be the guy that was out having beers with the boys and have a few too many beers and get up the next day and go. So I probably missed out on some of that stuff in my career, but I also wanted to try and have a long career. So that was a sacrifice that I made. And I probably took shit for it, like for going home early, right? Like, you're not going to stay out, and no, I'm actually going to go home and get some sleep. Because if I don't, I'm going to be dog shit tomorrow, and that'll give the coach an excuse not to play me. So I had some pretty good self control that way. which I've watched guys that have all the talent in the world that have no self-discipline go and blow that. So like I was probably at the opposite end of the spectrum. I should have probably loosened up a little bit at times. And I
Right.
did towards the end of my career. I wish I would have just done it a little more at the start, but maybe I wouldn't have had the career. So those are fine lines that you juggle as a player. You have your routine. I was the same way too. Like I couldn't watch too much video. I couldn't be at the rink. Like I needed 2 hours was perfect for me. Like
Yeah.
get there, get focused, get the job done. Good. I can't just be sitting there lingering. I'll lose my train of thought. And people don't understand too, though, like in your dressing room, there are so many different personalities and characters. And to make it work, you need that. Like if you had this many Cory Sariches in your room, it'd be probably pretty dull. Like you need like I love my music and I love to take control of the stereo too, but we needed Brad Lukowich, who was our DJ and looking after the stuff. And you need an Andre Waugh, like that guy. Talk about keeping a room loose. Like, oh my God, he was so funny. You like if you don't have that, and that's what some rooms are, I think, honestly missing.
Yeah.
It's the little components that all come together at the same time, and it's to piece that together it's a tough job as a GM, I'll tell you.
Yeah, it is. Scott Nickel, I mean, our former teammate now doing
Oh,
assistant GM there in Nashville. He had one of the best lines that I ever heard, and he said, "You can't have 20 milk drinkers on a hockey team." And it's
no,
like, yeah, I mean, 100% right. And I think again, when I'm working with players now, like in the capacity that I do, I mean, I call it mindset or a mental performance coach, but a lot of it is like, how do we get ready for a game for Cory Sarich versus Jason
yeah,
Perron versus whoever, right? And we're all different. So there's a different operating manual for you than there is for me. Yet we're operating in a social environment where we think potentially that we're supposed to be a certain way that maybe be counterintuitive to how we feel we can be, right?
hmm
And and so when you're in there, like I tell these guys, like you don't have to be like the captain is. You don't have to be like whoever is, right? Because that's not you. Like you have to find out who you are and be authentic to that. And the beauty in that is that that's what the team needs. They need you to be you. And when you're being you, you're going to have a better result on the ice 9 times out of 10, right? If you can find that happy space. And to your point, right? Like you remember these Andre Waz and Lukowich for doing these things that the team needed. There needed to be somebody in there to supply that. And because of it, you guys were better as a group, and it's I think that's fun. But it was in a day and age when I was speaking about myself that like that could come across as not caring,
exactly.
right?
Like
Depends on
if
who's
you're
looking
not
at it, right?
straight laced and focused, like John Tortorella, he caught Vinny Prospal chatting at a face off with one of his Czech buddies on another team. The camera zoomed right in on the two of them cracking jokes in the middle of this ultra serious game. Well, that was Vinny made the video the next day for all the wrong reasons, and Tortorella made an example of that, and it's like, not a chance that's happening. We don't. That's the enemy over there. We do not joke and laugh. Like hockey's always kind of had that culture too,
Yeah.
which is different than the other sports. Like you don't shake hands at the end of a game. Not everyone gets together. It's changed an awful lot since you and I played. Like it's a lot friendlier game out there.
Yeah.
But back then, that was a big no-no. Like
Right.
so
Yeah. And the perception was big too. And for me, I mean, we're getting into the weeds, but like I hated the guys that were like working out outside the coach's door, and I knew it was just like, you're not doing that for anybody but the perception, it's like, so I was almost like, I kind of got myself into trouble, I think, because I was so against that. Like, I'm not doing this for him. Like, I'm doing this for me and for our team, right? Like, I don't know. I kind of got my head in a knot sometimes with how that whole stuff was perceived. But I just, I talked to you about that one year in Detroit where I said like I was trying to be like super professional, and it was the worst I played. And so like that's when I talk to guys. It's like, and whatever perceptional means. Like I said, like man, I had this dedicated like warm up stretching routine. I was like super focused on my eating. I was like everything that you were supposed to do. I was trying to do it kind of all at once. Like whereas before I would just thought I kind of would be a feel guy, right? I'd take what I needed. If I needed a cold tub, I would take it. If I felt like I didn't need anything, I wouldn't do anything, right? Like it was more like more of a feel thing. And then, yeah, so then I try and get into be this ultra professional. And like, it was like, it felt like a grind and I wasn't as good. And so for me now working with players, I just love being able to share that story because it's like, we're not all built the same, right? And if it is about like your peak potential and your peak performance, you got to be curious about what that is, and you have to be able to be you have to be able to commit to it, right, and own it in some stretches. Did you have any type of a preparation? Were you a routine guy or yeah, straight laced routine, same thing every time?
So boring, right? But yeah, I wasn't the guy. I was the guy that could never go play two touch before a game, lose my focus.
Yeah.
Right, had to be like doing my own stretching or I didn't stretch early in my career, and then Grant Ledger told me stretch your body, stretch your career. So I started to pay a little more attention to that.
There you go.
Ate the same thing. Hated afternoon games because I never knew if I was supposed to have breakfast or chicken and pasta. Yeah, I was pretty much a creature of habit.
Right.
I wasn't really superstitious, but just really like things status quo, right? Like probably superstitious though. Can only use the same urinal every time in between periods, like stupid stuff.
Right.
I don't think I've ever tied my right skate first. Still to this day, white tape has never seen the blade of my stick. like stupid stuff, right? But
oh, that's awesome.
It kind of defines who you are, even maybe as you have a looser routine, but that defines who you are, and everybody's got their couple of things, though, right?
For sure. And I was the guy that like I'd have a different tape job like almost on a weekly basis, right? Like I'd be
but that's
drawing
you.
spaces. Yeah, exactly. Right.
And that's how you function.
Well, well, shit, we're well into this now, but there was two things that I wanted to cover that I think might be good ways to wrap it up, and one is being so close, and it's so funny that like my previous guest was Dean McCammon, who played 996 games, and you played 969 games. Is there any? I mean, obviously 1,000 is 1,000 and the silver stick and everything else. Like, was that something that did mean a lot to you that you would have loved to have gotten? Like, was it something that even like you thought about when you were getting towards the end of your career and the significance of it?
Yeah, I would have liked to get there. That would have been pretty neat. I prided myself on like trying to play through anything. I at one point there had a kind of the current defensive Ironman streak going, which has been long since obviously blown out of the water by defensemen and by forwards. But it was just something. I think I played like 5 seasons in a row, like 82 games. And that was just something that like I took great pride in. Get yourself stitched up, get out there. I didn't ever want to be that guy that was like hurting my team. Like if you were so injured that you couldn't go, I think there's a time and a place for that as well. But I just knew it was going to be difficult because of the scratch. I'm starting to be a healthy scratch in Calgary at the end. Missing a season and a half didn't help. Missing 04-05 and then missing half of, was it 12-13 or 11-12? Like that made it super difficult.
Well, you'd have been there, right? You'd have been there. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, and then there's all the other things that factor in. But I honestly, I was hoping to play one more season and maybe get a crack at getting there. I'd had a really fun season in Denver. I think they valued me. The problem there was my back went out on me. I ruptured a disc, which in hindsight was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because I'd been dealing with the back for like 5 or 6 years and just putting a Band-Aid on it. When it fully ruptured, I finally got to have surgery, and my back has been unbelievable for a decade since.
Oh, wow.
But I played in misery for those last few seasons as well. But I think Joe Sakic had a very similar experience at the end of his career with a surgery like that. And maybe this doesn't factor in, but he was the GM at the time. I'm like, well, he really had no interest in bringing me back. And then that summer of 2014 in July, I was run over on my pedal bike by a truck. So
Wow.
that put me that it may have been a blessing in disguise. Like, it definitely ended my career, and my career might have been done regardless. But I was at approaching the end of before my disc ruptured on April 1st, whatever year that was, 2014. I thought for sure I had another year or two in me. And then it's quickly, in the span of like 3 or 4 months, my career was for sure over.
How old were you when you retired?
I was 35.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a career, man. That's impressive. And actually, you touched on the other thing I was going to ask about, just the Ironman. You know, I mean, and the like the approach to that. Of course, you have to be blessed with health. You mean there can't be anything significant that happens that you can just will yourself to play through. But it's also not by accident. You know, like there had to have been scenarios and times there where maybe others might not have been in the lineup. You know, what was your approach to that from a mental perspective? And then after you talk about that, what was the moment where you lost that streak, and the one that you just kind of took it out of your hands?
Well, for me, just while I kind of got into it, and then all of a sudden you look down at your stats line and you've played like how many seasons in a row. It's like, oh, it's kind of crazy. And then it kind of becomes a point of pride, like being able to play every game and some of the stuff to get through. And I always thought I played a pretty hard game with like the contact and the blocking shots. And so you do have to have an element of luck as well to get through that, like not getting shot in the wrong spot. And so there was some of that factored into it. But yeah, like I look at like Phil Kessel, who's had the Ironman streak. Yeah, good on him, but is he really putting himself out there physically every night? You know, I had a sense of pride in the way I was playing the game too, and being considered an Ironman. Like Carlos Scrastens, who unfortunately is no longer with us, he was the guy who held the record at the time that I was chasing, and he was one of those kind of like quiet, unassuming, block every shot out there, grind it out type of defenseman. So it was a sense of the way I was contributing. I was out there every night, and I was impactful for my team. And this was kind of my way of the little bit of recognition that you get in a role like that. So I took extreme pride in it. And then when it ended in Calgary and Mike Keenan scratched me, it was not awesome. I understand there's a time and a place, and if you're not playing great hockey, maybe some guys are just like given their spot because of the streak that they've got going. I don't completely agree with that, but I had taken a puck in the mouth in Dallas, and then I had a full bubble on and had played 4 or 5 games, and our team wasn't playing great. It wasn't just me. And then all of a sudden, after 4 or 5 games, he came up with the excuse that I couldn't play with this mask on, and I was playing poorly, and yet he'd used me the 3 or 4 games before, and we had won most of them. And I was just like, it was just kind of, I think it was just his way of trying to spark the team and show that he was in control and that he held all the power and more of those fun mind games. So my Ironman streak came with a healthy scratch, came to an end. So it's kind of disappointing. But again, in hindsight, at the time it hurt a little bit. And I had my middle child, I had my wife was induced to keep the streak alive, and you do some crazy stuff like that, and then all of a sudden it's kind of all for naught. That pisses you off a little bit. But
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, that's, I would imagine, more than a little bit. Was how did the team respond to that?
well, there's some fun stories that came out of it. Rhett Warner, who was being scratched at the time, he ended up scoring the game-winning goal in this lollipop wrist shot from the point. And then he had one incredible celebration on the plane that night that's been talked about over and over. It involved a wrestling mask and none of his clothes on the plane.
Oh, Warnsy.
So
Oh my
it
God.
at least, if for anything, put the team in a better mindset, and they had a little bit of fun with it. So, but ultimately it had no impact on anything.
So it
So
didn't. So there was no rallying. It wasn't like the boys stood up and said this isn't right to Keenan. Or did you expect anything like that, or would you have hoped for anything like that, or not?
well, I think some guys spoke their mind here and there, but it's competitive and like it is what it is. So it gave someone else an opportunity. And then to go and speak to Mike, I don't know if anybody ever really wanted to do that. So it just kind of, it was a big, kind of a big deal for a hot second. And then that was it.
Right. Then it went away.
And I only missed the 2 games. I think I played 80 games that year, but kind of
They were both
stunk again.
scratches.
They're both scratches. Yeah. 2 games in a row.
So when was the first time you missed because of injury?
I'd have to go. I think it was maybe the next year. Actually, I started after that. I was the Band-Aid streak. I had broken feet and you name it.
Really?
My last 3 years in Calgary, I was in the trainer's room way too often. So I went from one to the extreme other. It all caught up with me.
Gotcha. Fair enough. That's funny. Yeah, Warrensy, past guest on the show. We were drafted the same year to Florida, so like I was with him for a little bit, and we played World Junior together. Warrensy and I. He's quite a great character. He's a good dude. I don't even have to know any more about that story, and I think I know enough about it to to see him on the plane.
If there's one guy who stayed true to himself throughout his whole career, he's been good at it. Right? Rhett Warrener has not changed. I don't think since the minute I met him in junior.
Yeah.
And I used to be scared. I was scared of him when I first met him. Like he was a big kid. He was a man, and I was just a boy figuring things out when I first got introduced to him. And I was like, I better toughen up quick.
Yeah.
So
his shoulders were this wide, right? At like 16 years old. That's awesome.
There was him, Belak, McAllister. I'm like, I'm going to survive with this crew. Better put some weight on.
Yeah, that's crazy. You guys weren't better. Actually, you said how bad you. I mean, Mark Dayal has been on this program, as has Frankie Bantam. And
Frankie Bantam scored 83 goals that season. Him and Mark, they had
183.
Yeah, 83 goals.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that bonkers?
But we were a one-line team: Wilm, Dale, and Bantam.
Yeah,
like they provided all of our offense. It's crazy. We only had 29 wins.
Yeah.
We were.
Do you know that nobody has surpassed Mark Dayal's point total since he put that up?
Really?
Yeah.
It's crazy,
isn't it?
Yeah.
And like Bedard, obviously he won't be back next year, but like he was kind of whatever, not even really flirting because he didn't get to that one. I think what he had 160 or something Diesel had that year. But anyways, yeah, I mean, you saw one of the most prolific, seasons in frontline seat in recent history. I mean, even if you can call that recent, that's been like probably 25 years now or whatever the heck it's been since.
Yeah, 90. It would have been 94-ish, 90, 95-ish, somewhere in there.
Pretty crazy. But yeah, those were good interviews. And Mark Dayal, boy, for anyone listening now who hasn't heard his story, like that's a pretty wild story to go back if you want to listen to his interview. One of the most kind of, I got a lot of messages from that just about him and what he shared there on that story. But anyways, Cory, you've been absolutely an amazing guest. I really appreciate you stepping in. Like I said, we joked at the start. I mean, I kind of thought, well, this will be the first time I've talked to Mr. Sarich, and then I realized that we were actually teammates. So we must have had a conversation at some point. And
had a cup of tea in Detroit.
Yeah, and yeah, no, it was awesome to have a conversation with you. And I wanted to talk about your kid, your 09, and your involvement in minor hockey now, but it always just kind of tends to do that, right? There's enough stuff to talk about that you sort of can go all kinds of places. So maybe eventually we'll have a part 2 and can maybe. Because I think it is an interesting conversation now, like looking back with, a 1,000-game NHL career and all his pro experience. And now you're seeing the state of the game and how it's changed, not only at the NHL level, but at the minor level. And to coach through that is a whole different perspective and kind of a whole new conversation. So we'll save that for part 2. But I did want to say thanks. Thanks for coming out and thanks for sharing all your wisdom with us. And I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was fun.
Cheers.